In this video article, we're going to look at how the same bass line can be played at different rhythmic levels. And by the same bass line, what I'm talking about is the same devices. And we've been talking about devices in the last few videos, which are the building blocks of rock and pop. So before we really get started, just want to show you this, tell you a bit about who I am. I am Paul Wolf from howtoplaybassdotcom. This is a screenshot of my Amazon author page, and you can see some of the 27 or so books that I've published at this point in time there. So go and check some of those out, look at the reviews, and that will tell you more about me than just about anything, I think, and more about me as a teacher. Okay, in this video, as I said, we've been talking about devices, but what we're going to do is talk about the rhythmic execution of those devices and how you can take the same device and use it for quarter note style lines, use it for eighth note style lines, and use it for 16th note style lines. But there's different gradations of those, as you'll see as we go through the video. And the reason that you can use the same vocabulary in these different rhythmic executions is because devices are fractal. So what that means is you can play a device at a quarter note level, you can play it at an eighth note level, and you can play it at a 16th note level, and there's more nuance on that. So you can be playing a device, the device can be sounding at a quarter note level, but the rhythm can actually be an eighth note rhythm, and you'll see that as we go through the video. So let's start with this simple example. I think we finished up with this, or it was featured in one of the previous videos that I've done, talking about these kind of topics and devices and building blocks. This is a simple chord progression, which I'm sure you'll recognize, and the bass line is obviously a quarter note bass line. It's made up of simple devices, major triads, there's root 3/4 chromatic or 8/3/4 chromatic in bars 4 and 8, which they're really cool devices when you're moving upwards in perfect fifths, i.e. going from F to C, or downwards in perfect fourths, as happens in bar 8, where we're going from C to G. The G chord not shown on this example, but that's the first chord of the next section of the song. Anyway, let's have a listen to this video so you can hear the example in context. Okay, so that's a pretty simple example. The one thing about it is that the quarter note line doesn't really work too brilliantly with the backing that I used that was generated with Band in a Box. So the simplest way of making that example fit is to use a thing called rhythmic replacement, where we take each of those quarter notes and we replace them with 2 eighth notes of the same pitch, and we end up with this bass line that you can see here. It's exactly the same bass line, except each quarter note has been replaced with these 2 eighth notes of the same pitch. Now, I've got this filmed as well, so listen to this. Remember, from a device perspective, it's exactly the same, but listen to the difference that using the rhythmic replacement makes. So that had a really different feel, and I just really want to belabor the point of, in that line, it was created just by taking the previous quarter note line and swapping every quarter note for a pair of eighth notes. So I created an example, it's notation only. The top line is the original quarter note line, and the second line is the same line but 2 eighth notes per quarter note. And if you have a look at that, and I'll talk slowly so you've got time to just scan that. If you pick any bar at random and look at the notes, you'll see each of the quarter notes in each of the pair of staffs has 2 eighth notes of that same pitch underneath. So this diagram really explains how you can think of the top line as how the device notes are being executed, and the second line is the rhythm that they're being executed in. So this is an important concept to grasp that I don't remember ever seeing anyone else talk about. So feel free to just rewind this section of the video and watch it again and make sure you understand it. And when you've done that, we can move on. And there's some key points there. So device notes can be executed at a different rhythmic level to what you're actually playing. So one quarter note device note, as we've seen, can be executed with 2 eighth notes, but that carries on going down because of the fractal nature of device notes. So 1 eighth note device note could be executed with 2 16th notes, and we'll see an example with this towards the end of the video. An important thing to note, when using device notes at an eighth note level, we need to think about the concept of front end of the bar and back end of the bar. And I've got an example here, and if you have a look at this, what we've got is we've got the same devices being used as in the previous examples, but they're now on the back end of the bar, which is beats 3 and beats 4. And now the device notes are being used at an eighth note level. So if we look at bar 1, you can see on beat 3, we've got a 4-note device, which is the root 3-5-3. It's the major triad. If you scroll the video back, you'll see that the root 3-5-3 was used in all the previous examples. Or if you look at bar 4, we talked about the root 3-4 chromatic. That's on beat 3 and beat 4. So that's the back end of the bar. We've got a complete device in eighth notes being used on the back end of the bar. On the front end of the bar, so beats 1 and 2, we've now got a 2-note device, and in most bars it's some configuration of roots and fifths. Some of them are eighths and fifths, so that the root note is above the fifth, so you're using a root note and a lower fifth. That's bar 1, bar 2, bar 3, but in bar 4 you've got a root note and an upper fifth. And what's now happening is, and in the previous video I talked about harmonically strong beats being beats 1 and beats 3. So what you've got happening, although we've got less notes, there is more harmonic movement in the bass line, and the next slide has the bass line, so you'll be able to hear it, because what's happening is the 2-note device on beats 1 and 2 in every bar plays the root note, so it grounds the ear in where we are in terms of the harmony, and then the second note on the end of beat 2 is an approach note. In this instance, it's always a dominant approach note of some sort, to the device that starts on beat 3. So that really sets that bar up, sets that device up on the back end of the bar, and it gives you a lot more harmonic movement in the bar. So let's listen to that example so you can hear that harmonic movement. So that's a much more dynamic bass line than the original eighth note version of the bass line, because you've shifted the device notes to the back end of the bar, and then you're setting those up as well with approach notes. So even though there's less notes in that example, it sounds much more harmonically active. And we can take this concept even further, and we can put a device on the front end of the bar. So this is, and the backing in the practice track has now changed to more of an R&B kind of feel. Same chord progression though, and what we've got in this example is we've got a device on the front end of each bar, and then the device on the front end of the bar finishes on the end of beat 2 on the same note, which is the root note, as the device starting on the back end of the bar. So what you can do is you can hold with a tie those 2 notes together, and so what happens is you get the first device overlaps into the second device, and so what the ear hears is the first device and then that holding note, and then it hears the last 3 notes of the device, and the first note on beats 3 in each bar isn't explicitly sounded, but it carries over from the previous device. So this will be a really familiar sound to you if you've listened to any kind of classic 60s R&B, Jameson in the mid-60s, 64, 65, Duck Dunn with Stax. If you've listened to any of that, this will be a really familiar kind of sound. But what it does do, by using a device on the front end of the bar, which remember is beats 1 and 2, and a device on the back end of the bar, it makes the bass line much more harmonically denser and harmonically moving. And weirdly, I was thinking about this video yesterday while I was coming home on the radio, and I heard, I think it was a Gwen Stefani when she was with No Doubt song, and on the chorus there was an eighth note kind of feel throughout the line. In the verse, the bass line was quite static and quite root note oriented, but to really lift the chorus, the drums went to kind of like a driving 4-to-the-floor snare, very Motown-esque, and the bass line played 2 devices per bar. So the bass line wasn't lifted by becoming more rhythmically active, it was lifted by becoming more harmonically active. So it was a really interesting demonstration of that as I was thinking about the video coming back from the meeting I'd been to. So let's have a listen to this example so you can hear that effect. So hopefully you're with me so far. At any point, if you're thinking, I'm not sure about that, you can leave a comment in the video underneath the video and I'll get back to you as soon as I see it. I usually check once a day, so it may take 24 hours. But this is a really important video, so to understand the concept, if you're not sure, go back and watch it again and see if a second viewing and a second listening makes it come alive for you. What we're going to do now is we're going to look at rhythmic replacement with 16th notes. So I've changed the chord progression slightly, and instead of it being 2 bars of C, 2 bars of F, and then it went C and B flat, C, whatever it went to, 2 Cs and a B flat and then back to C. We've now got a bar of C7 and a bar of F7, and in this example, which plays twice, bars 1 and 2 are just using front end back end concept. So we've got a device on the back end of the bar, and then on the front end of the bar we've got a 2-note device which sets that up. But notice in bar 1 we're using a different approach note. It's not a dominant approach note anymore. And then in bars 3 and bar 4 what we've got is exactly the same line as in bars 1 and 2, and by all means pause the video to confirm for yourself that it is exactly the same line. But what's different is on the and of beat 2, the first and beat of beat 3, and the and of beat 4, the eighth notes, each of the eighth notes have been substituted with 2 16th notes of the same pitch to give us the rhythmic replacement. So what we suddenly get is a 16th note sounded bass line, but it's actually conceived and the device notes are at an 8th note level. So again, this is a really important concept to get your head around, because this is how most 16th note bass lines are created. If you think of someone like Rocco Prestia, he's renowned as a busy 16th note bass player. All of his lines are like this. You can play devices at a 16th note level. I'm not going to demonstrate that in this video. It will come in future videos, I'm sure. Very few bass players do that. Most bass players who play 16th note lines do it like this. So the line is conceived in 8th notes, and then rhythmic replacement is used to convert it into a 16th note line. So let's listen to that example. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, so let's just recap what we've covered. Device notes can be played at different rhythmic levels, so you can conceive a line in quarter notes or in 8th notes, even in 16th notes. And you can also, as you get more advanced, you can conceive a line where different sections of the line are conceived at different rhythmic levels. The rhythm of what you're playing can be at a different rhythmic level to the level that you've conceived the device notes that are forming the building block of the line. And again, if you need to go back and look, but you can conceive the line at quarter note but play it in eighth notes, or swing eighth notes. This is how most blues rock lines are played, by the way. They're conceived in quarter notes, but they're played with a swing eighth note rhythm. So each quarter note is rhythmic replacement is used to replace each quarter note with a pair of swing eighth notes, and you can make them more complex by throwing in modifying devices, which that will have to be another video. We don't have time to cover those in this video, but the important key points are: you can conceive a line at one rhythmic level, but suggest to the listener that it's a different rhythmic level because you've used rhythmic replacement and swapped a device note out for two notes of the next rhythmic level down. So quarter note would go to eighth notes would go to 16th notes. Theoretically, 16th notes would go to 32nd notes, but I don't ever recall really seeing that. And all this is possible because devices are fractal and you can do them at these different levels. And I've even seen devices used at a half note level. There's a great example in Sweet Home Chicago in one of the ride out sections where you've got this 10 or 11 choruses with multiple solos. And Duck plays an 8 flat 7 6 5 line. But what he does is the rhythm he uses to play it is quarter notes, but the 4 notes of that device are played twice before he changes device notes. So they take up 8 beats or 2 bars. So the device is effectively being conceived at a half note level. So it can go the other way too. And why this is great is you can find something in a line of a player you really like, and let's say it's a 16th note fill, and you go, oh, I really like that device. Well, you can take it up the other way. So you can play it in eighth notes, you could play it in quarter notes. They move seamlessly through the different levels as long as you're aware of how each device connects to different root notes, something again we'll talk about in future. But this is how a relatively small vocabulary can be used to create bass lines in just about any genre. And one thing that I often say, and the 3 examples I give are Rocco Prestia, I've mentioned him already, Duck Dunn, who I've also mentioned, Tommy Shannon with Stevie Ray Vaughan. Each of these guys, who are all names you should know, all fabulous bass players, all had relatively small vocabularies, maybe 15 to 20 devices, but how they were able to create serious bodies of work is they had multiple ways of making that small vocabulary sound bigger than it was by using modifying devices, by using rhythmic variations. I talked about how Duck did it on Sweet Home Chicago. I mentioned Rocco with 16th notes. So you don't have to learn hundreds and hundreds of different ideas to create a vocabulary that you can use to create bass lines. If you create a foundational vocabulary, I often suggest to people there's 7 or 8 foundational units that I suggest, and then pick and choose another 8 to 10 from the rest of the vocabulary that I've codified, and that will give you a really broad vocabulary that will probably give you a broader vocabulary than the majority of your contemporaries. Okay, in the next video, we're going to take some ideas from Jameson's bass line on Heatwave, the Martha Reeves and the Vandellas version. I was asked to do this by one of my students, so I've been thinking about that for a couple of weeks, and that's what we're going to cover in the next video. That's a quarter note bass line, and so as I've already mentioned, we can take some of those ideas and we can add them to bass lines at an 8th note level or at a 16th note level even. So just because Jameson's lines and the devices he's using that we're going to identify are in a quarter note, that doesn't mean you can only use them in quarter note bass lines. So hopefully that will be quite eye-opening for you. My student also asked if I could create a line using ideas from Jameson's performance on Heatwave for like a swingy version of Can't Buy Me Love. If you saw my video, Swinging the Beatles, you'll know what the kind of thing that I did with that, and it's going to be the same kind of thing in this video once we've identified some ideas from Jameson's performance, but we'll use those to give us the foundation of that line. And as I mentioned, those ideas that we're going to lift can be played at 8th note and even 16th note levels. Now, if you want to go into some of the stuff we've talked about further, if you're a beginner, the book on the left, How to Play Bass Guitar in 50 Songs, Module 1, is probably the one. If you can play a bit and you want to explore this, then learning from James Jameson Volume 1 and going through that series, that takes you from Jameson's playing in the mid-60s right through to his complex 16th note playing in Volume 4 of that series in the late 60s. If you consider yourself an intermediate player, you play things like, you play, say, Pino Palladino's kind of lines with John Mayer, that kind of thing, then $1 Million Bass Lines might be the book for you, because that's kind of like a thesaurus stroke dictionary, which basically is a reference work, so that when you know all this stuff, you can flick through it and go, okay, this is the idea I want. And this book's got stuff about deliberate composition. It's got stuff about chord movements, 2 chord matrices. There's 15 or 20 devices detailed in the book. But it's presented in very much a thesaurus style way, so that you'll have to take the information and add that into your own exercises and learn things based on what you already know. So those are books you can get started with if you want to explore further. Thank you for your time with this video, and I'll catch you in the next video, where we're going to lift some ideas from Jameson's performance on Heatwave.